Hey, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jennifer and I'll be narrating today's story. This is a piece of human written science fiction, so get comfortable and let's jump right in.
The Queen's child hid behind me, and the entire throne room went silent. The shuttle descended through layers of emerald green atmosphere, and Matt Gordon pressed his forehead against the viewport, watching the capital city of the Lethari Empire materialize below. Crystalline spires rose like frozen music, their surfaces rippling with colors he had no name for. Every structure seemed to pulse in rhythm, as though the entire planet breathed as one organism. He'd been briefed, of course. The Lethari were a psychic species, their entire civilization built on something they called the Biotic Harmony, a shared emotional and mental resonance that connected every citizen in a symphony of consciousness. To be Lethari was to never be alone, to always know the emotional state of those around you, to broadcast your very essence into the collective awareness. Matt had spent 12 years working with neuroatypical children in Earth's colonial sectors. He'd seen every variation of human neurology, every beautiful difference in how minds could work. But this was something else entirely. The shuttle touched down on a landing platform that seemed to grow directly from the palace itself. The moment the airlock opened, Matt felt it a pressure against his mind, like standing too close to a massive speaker. Not painful, exactly, but present. Insistent, the Biotic Harmony trying to read him, to connect with him, and finding only silence. Two guards in ceremonial armor met him, their skin a deep jade color that shifted to troubled orange when they looked at him. They didn't speak, just gestured for him to follow. Matt shouldered his equipment bag and walked behind them, his boots loud in the crystalline corridors. The Emerald Palace was alive. That was the only way to describe it. The walls themselves seemed to hum with consciousness, and as courtiers passed in flowing robes, Matt could see the colors rippling across their exposed skin, flashes of contentment, curiosity, disdain. Every emotion laid bare for those who could read it. They led him through a series of increasingly ornate chambers until they reached doors that must have been 30 feet tall, carved from what looked like living wood that pulsed with bioluminescent veins. The doors opened. Queen Xevas sat on a throne that seemed to have grown from the floor itself, her posture perfect, her expression controlled. But Matt had spent years reading micro-expressions, body language, the tiny tells that revealed what people were really feeling. He saw the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her eyes, the way her fingers gripped the armrests just a fraction too hard. She was exhausted. Her skin was a vibrant green that reminded Matt of Earth's rainforests before the climate collapse, with darker mossy patterns that traced elegant lines along her collarbone and up her neck. Her hair was the most striking thing about her, a luminescent pink that seemed to glow from within, currently pulled back in an elaborate style that must have taken hours. It shifted subtly as he watched, darkening to something closer to magenta. "Mr. Gordon," she said, her voice rich and melodic with an accent he couldn't quite place, "you have traveled far." "Your Majesty." Matt bowed his head, the gesture feeling inadequate in this alien throne room. "Please dispense with the formality. We have little time for such things." She rose from her throne with fluid grace, and Matt was struck by how tall she was, nearly 7 feet, her movements carrying an inherent authority that needed no psychic reinforcement. "You were briefed on the situation?" "I was told you need a security consultant for the prince," Matt said carefully. Xevas's hair flashed a darker color, pain perhaps, or frustration. "That is the official story, yes. The truth is somewhat more complicated." She descended the steps of her dais, and as she moved closer, Matt noticed the faint lines of fatigue around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands that she quickly controlled. "Walk with me." She led him through a side door into a private corridor where the walls were less ornate, but somehow more intimate, covered in what looked like living tapestries that shifted and breathed. "The Biotic Harmony is everything to my people," Xevas began, her voice lower now, more personal. "It is how we communicate, how we connect, how we know each other. From the moment a Lethari child is born, they broadcast their essence into the harmony. It is as natural as breathing." "But your son doesn't," Matt said quietly. Xevas stopped walking, her back to him. Her hair had gone almost purple now. "My son is silent, a void in the harmony. When I reach for him, I feel nothing. No emotion, no presence, no response. It is as if he does not exist." Matt heard the break in her voice, the raw grief she was trying to control. "The court believes he is broken," she continued, "defective. there are whispers that he should be removed from the line of succession, that the dynasty cannot continue through a silent heir. She turned to face him then, and Matt saw tears, actual tears on her alien features. But he is my son, Mr. Gordon. And I refuse to believe he is broken. Show me, Matt said simply. They walked deeper into the palace, into the royal residential quarters, where the psychic pressure grew stronger, more oppressive. Matt could feel it now like a physical weight, and he understood suddenly why Xevas had looked so drawn. Living in this constant symphony must be overwhelming even for those born to it. The prince's chambers were surprisingly sparse, with heavy curtains drawn against the light and thick carpets that absorbed sound. A figure stood guard outside a warrior whose skin flashed hostile red when Matt approached. "This is the royal bodyguard," Xevas said. "He will be assigned to you and the prince." The bodyguard looked Matt up and down, his expression making clear what he thought of this primitive human and his primitive methods. But he said nothing, just stepped aside. The room beyond was dim, lit only by soft bioluminescent strips along the floor, and there, curled on an enormous cushion in the corner, was a small figure. Prince Valen was tiny, couldn't have been more than 5 in human years, though Matt had learned that Lethari aged differently. His skin was a lighter green than his mother's, almost mint-colored, with delicate patterns that reminded Matt of frost on glass. His hair was the same luminescent pink as Xevas's, but dimmer, as though the light had been turned down. But it was his eyes that caught Matt's attention. Large, expressive, sapphire-blue eyes that tracked their movement with sharp intelligence. The boy wasn't broken. Matt could see that immediately. He was processing, observing, thinking. Valen just wasn't broadcasting. "Valen," Xevas said softly, kneeling down. "This is Matt. He's come to visit you." The boy's eyes flicked to Matt, then away. He pulled his knees tighter to his chest, making himself smaller. "May I?" Matt asked, gesturing to the cushion. Xevas nodded, though her expression was uncertain. Matt approached slowly, making sure Valen could see him clearly. He didn't reach out, didn't try to touch. He simply sat down on the floor about 6 feet away, settling into a comfortable cross-legged position. And then he waited. He could feel Xevas's confusion, the bodyguard's impatience. But Matt had learned long ago that the first rule of working with children who existed outside the expected norms was patience. You moved at their pace, not yours. After what must have been 5 minutes, an eternity in the tense atmosphere of the royal chambers, Valen's eyes flickered back to Matt, studying him. Matt let himself be studied, keeping his expression neutral, his body language open but not demanding. "Your Majesty," came a voice from the doorway. An older Lethari in elaborate robes, his skin a deep emerald that flashed with scarcely concealed contempt when he looked at the prince. "The High Council requires your presence." "I will be there momentarily, Grand Vizier," Xevas said, tension creeping into her voice. "They are waiting now, Your Majesty. The matter of the succession cannot be delayed." Matt saw Xevas's jaw tighten, saw the war playing out across her features. Duty versus love, empire versus child. "Go," Matt said quietly. "I'll stay with him." "Mr. Gordon," "I don't think," the Vizier began. "I said I'll stay with him." Matt didn't raise his voice, didn't change his tone, but something in the words made the Vizier's mouth snap shut. "Your Majesty, you hired me to help the prince. Let me do my job." Xevas looked at him for a long moment, and Matt saw something shift in her expression. Surprise, perhaps, or relief that someone was willing to establish a boundary with her court. She nodded slowly. "Very well. The royal bodyguard will remain outside." When they were alone, or as alone as they could be with a guard just beyond the door, Matt settled more comfortably into his position. He pulled his equipment bag closer and began unpacking, moving slowly and deliberately. A portable data pad, a small toolkit, and a collection of items he'd brought from Earth: fidget toys, pressure tools, sensory objects that had helped countless children find their voice in their own way. Valen watched with those impossibly blue eyes, his curiosity evident even if his emotions weren't broadcasting into some psychic field. Matt pulled out a small object, a simple fidget cube with buttons, switches, and spinners on each face. He began manipulating it absently, letting the soft clicks and whirs fill the quiet space. Click, spin, click, a rhythm emerging. Valen's eyes tracked the movement. Matt continued, never looking directly at the boy, just existing in the same space, creating a pattern of sound and motion that had no demands attached to it. Slowly, incrementally, Valen began to unfold from his protective ball. His legs extended slightly, his hands loosened their grip on his knees. Matt allowed himself a small smile. Not broken, just speaking a different language. Outside, he could hear the distant hum of the palace, the weight of an empire pressing down. But here, in this dim room, there was just a human and a child who needed someone to meet him where he was. The first step of a very long journey. Matt arrived at the prince's chambers the next morning to find the bodyguard waiting with an expression that might have been carved from stone. The warrior's skin color remained a steady, hostile amber. "The prince has not left his chambers since yesterday," the bodyguard said, his tone making clear this was somehow Matt's fault. "Has anyone tried to make him leave?" Matt asked, already knowing the answer. The bodyguard's silence was telling. Matt entered the dim room to find Valen exactly where he'd been the day before, curled on his cushion. But this time, when Matt settled onto the floor, the boy's eyes found him immediately. Watching, waiting. Progress. Matt began his routine again, the fidget cube, the rhythmic sounds. But today, he introduced something new. He pulled out a small device that created gentle vibrations, a tool he'd used with children who had sensory processing differences. He held it against his own arm first, let Valen see that it wasn't threatening. Then he set it on the floor between them and activated it. A soft hum filled the space, barely audible but present. The vibrations traveled through the floor. Valen's eyes widened. He shifted slightly, placing one small hand on the floor as if to feel the sensation better. "It's called a tactile oscillator," Matt said quietly, knowing that even if Valen couldn't or wouldn't respond, he was listening. Some people find rhythmic sensations helpful. They can be grounding when everything else feels too much. He adjusted the frequency, watching Valen's reaction. Too fast and the boy pulled back, too slow and he lost interest. But there was a range, a specific frequency where Valen seemed to relax, his shoulders dropping, his breathing becoming more even. Matt made a mental note: low frequency, slow, steady rhythm. The opposite of the high-pitched psychic chatter that must fill every corridor of this palace. The door opened behind them, and Matt didn't need to turn to know who it was. He'd learned to recognize the queen's presence not through any psychic ability, but through the subtle shift in the room's atmosphere, the scarcely perceptible scent of something like night-blooming flowers. "How is he?" Xevas asked softly. "Responsive," Matt said. "Watch." He changed the oscillator's frequency, speeding it up. Valen immediately tensed, pulling back. Matt returned it to the slower rhythm, and the boy relaxed again. "He's communicating," Matt explained. "He's telling us what he likes and doesn't like. He's just not doing it the way your people expect." Xevas moved closer, and Matt heard her sharp intake of breath. He responds to you." "He responds to the environment I'm creating," Matt corrected gently. "Low stimulation, predictable patterns, physical sensations instead of psychic ones. I think, and this is just a hypothesis at this stage, that the biotic harmony might actually be painful for him, like standing next to a speaker turned up too loud." "Painful?" Xevas' hair shifted to a distressed purple. "But that would mean every moment of every day." "Yeah," Matt said quietly, "which is why he's learned to shut down. It's not that he can't communicate, it's that the noise is too overwhelming for him to push through." Xevas sank down onto the floor beside Matt, her regal bearing momentarily forgotten. Up close, he could see the intricate patterns on her skin more clearly, the way they seemed to shift and flow like living artwork. She was beautiful in a way that defied human aesthetic standards, utterly alien, yet compelling. "Can you help him?" she asked, and the vulnerability in her voice made Matt's chest tighten. "I can teach him ways to interact that don't require the harmony," Matt said. "But Your Majesty, I need you to understand something. I'm not here to fix him. He's not broken. The court believes—" "The court is wrong," Matt's voice was firm. "Your son has a different neurology. That doesn't make him defective. It makes him different. And different can be a strength, if we let it be." Xevas turned to look at him fully, and Matt found himself caught in her gaze. Her eyes were a striking amber color with flecks of gold, and they held an intensity that made him acutely aware of her proximity. She smelled of those night flowers, and something else, something warm and alive that had nothing to do with alien biology and everything to do with the woman beneath the crown. "You speak with great certainty for someone who has been here less than a day," she said, but there was no hostility in it, only curiosity. "I spent 12 years working with children whose brains worked differently from the expected norm." Matt replied. I learned that normal is just a statistical average, not a goal. Your son's mind works differently. That's not wrong, it's just different. The harmony has been our way for thousands of years. And it works beautifully for those whose neurology aligns with it, Matt acknowledged. But for those who don't, for them, it's not a symphony, it's noise. Xevas was quiet for a long moment, watching her son. Valen had begun to trace patterns on the floor, following the vibrations with his fingertips. His expression was focused, calm. Matt had never seen him look so at peace, according to the briefing materials. There is something I must tell you, Xevas said finally, her voice dropping even lower. The High Council has given me 1 lunar cycle, 30 of your days, to prove that Valen can connect to the harmony. If I cannot, they will move to remove him from the succession. And replace him with who? The rival Duchess has a son. She has been positioning herself for years, waiting for me to show weakness. Xevas' hair flashed with anger, a brief spike of crimson. She would tear apart everything my family has built. Matt studied her profile, the proud line of her jaw, the weight she carried in every breath. You're not just worried about the succession, are you? You're worried about him. What they'll do to him if he's no longer valuable. Xevas' hand trembled slightly before she pressed it flat against her thigh. There are precedents. Silent Lethari are rare, but they exist. They are sent to distant colonies, or they simply disappear. I cannot let that happen to my son. Then we have 30 days to teach him a different way to communicate, Matt said. Not to make him fit the harmony, but to show the court that he can connect in his own way. Is such a thing possible? I don't know, Matt admitted, but I'm willing to try. Xevas turned to him again, and this time her hand moved slowly, carefully, until it rested on his forearm. Her skin was warm, almost hot to the touch, and Matt felt a jolt of awareness run through him. Not psychic, just physical. The electric recognition of attraction between two beings who'd been drawn together by impossible circumstances. You are a strange man, Matt Gordon, she said softly. Your mind is quiet, no broadcast, no resonance. It is like standing in a room after a lifetime of noise. Is that good or bad? Matt asked, acutely aware of the weight of her hand on his arm. I do not yet know. Her fingers tightened slightly. But it is intriguing. The moment stretched between them, charged with something that had nothing to do with psychic harmony and everything to do with two people recognizing each other across a gulf of difference. Then Valen made a small sound, not quite a word, but an acknowledgement of their presence, and the moment broke. Xevas withdrew her hand, her regal mask sliding back into place. But when she looked at Matt, something had shifted in her expression. I will inform the court that you require absolute privacy for your work, she said, rising gracefully to her feet. No interruptions, no observations. The bodyguard will remain outside, but he will not enter unless you call for him. Thank you, Your Majesty. Xevas, she said quietly. When we are here with my son, you may call me Xevas. She left before Matt could respond, her presence lingering like a ghost in the room. Matt turned back to Valen, who was watching him with those knowing blue eyes. The boy tilted his head, a gesture that seemed almost questioning. Yeah, kid, Matt said softly. I feel it too. Your mom is something else. Valen's lips quirked in what might have been the ghost of a smile. Definitely not broken. By the 5th day, Matt had established a routine. He arrived each morning as the palace was waking, when the psychic noise was at its lowest. He would sit with Valen, introducing new tools and techniques, building a vocabulary of touch and rhythm that bypassed the harmony entirely. Pressure vests that provided constant, gentle compression, weighted blankets that grounded the nervous system, fidget tools that gave the hands something to do while the mind processed. Matt brought the entire toolkit of human occupational therapy and adapted it to a small alien prince who needed an anchor in a storm of psychic noise. And Valen was responding. Slowly, cautiously, but undeniably. He had begun to seek out Matt's presence, moving closer throughout their sessions. He would sometimes place his hand near Matt's, not quite touching, as if testing the waters of physical connection. On the morning of the 6th day, Matt introduced something new. This, he said, holding up a small rectangular device, is something we used to call a metronome. It creates a steady beat, a rhythm you can follow. He set it on the floor between them and activated it. Tick, tick, tick. A slow, measured pulse that filled the quiet room. Valen watched it, his eyes tracking the small pendulum. Matt began to tap his finger against his knee in time with the beat. Tick, tap, a perfect synchronization of sound and motion. Then Valen, so slowly Matt almost missed it, began to tap his own small hand against the cushion. Following the rhythm, joining the pattern. Matt's breath caught. He maintained the tempo, not wanting to break the fragile connection. Tick, tap, tick, tap. They sat like that for long minutes, two beings moving in perfect synchronization without a single psychic bond between them. Just rhythm, just pattern. Just the ancient human art of matching breath and heartbeat to another's. Matt gradually slowed the metronome. Valen adjusted his tapping without hesitation, following the new rhythm. Matt sped it up slightly. Again, Valen matched him perfectly. "You're not silent at all, are you?" Matt said softly. "You're just speaking a language they can't hear." Valen's eyes met his, and for the first time, the boy smiled. A full, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. The door opened behind them, and Matt turned to see Xevas standing in the entrance, frozen. She must have been there for several minutes, watching. And now she was staring at her son's smiling face with an expression of such naked longing that Matt felt like an intruder on a deeply private moment. "Valen," she whispered, moving forward. Her hair had gone almost white with emotion, joy, Matt guessed, or hope. But as Xevas approached, Matt saw Valen tense. The boy's smile faded, and he began to curl back into himself, his hands coming up to cover his ears. "Stop," Matt said quietly. "Stay where you are." Xevas froze, confusion and hurt flashing across her features. "It's not you," Matt explained, rising and moving toward her. "It's the harmony. You broadcast strong emotions, and right now you're overwhelmed with feeling. That's beautiful, but for Valen, it's like a siren going off in his head. I don't understand. I'm his mother. He should what? Tolerate pain because of biology?" Matt shook his head. "Xevas, you need to learn to approach him differently, the way you would approach anyone with a different sensory experience." "Tell me how." Her voice was fierce, desperate. "Please, Matt, tell me how to reach my own son." Matt looked at her, at the proud queen reduced to begging, and made a decision. He took her hand the first time he'd initiated physical contact with her and led her to where Valen sat, still tense and wary. "Slow your breathing," Matt instructed softly, still holding her hand. "Focus on making yourself calm, empty. Whatever you do to meditate or center yourself, do that now." Xevas closed her eyes, and Matt watched as her breathing deepened, slowed. The patterns on her skin, which had been shifting rapidly, began to still. Her hair faded from bright white to a softer pink. "Good," Matt murmured. "Now, don't try to reach him with your mind. Reach him with your body. Physical touch, not psychic connection." He guided her hand toward Valen, moving slowly, giving the boy time to process. Valen watched them approach, his eyes wary but not panicked. "May I?" Xevas asked her son, her voice just above a whisper. Valen didn't respond verbally, but he didn't pull away either. Matt took that as permission and guided Xevas's hand to rest gently on top of Valen's small head. The boy went very still. Xevas's breath hitched. "Just stay there," Matt coached. "Don't push any emotion at him. Just let him feel the physical warmth of your hand. The weight, the pressure, that's the connection right now." They stayed like that for a long moment, and then Valen did something extraordinary. He leaned into his mother's touch, pressing his head more firmly against her palm. Seeking the pressure, the contact, the physical evidence of connection that required no psychic bond at all. A sound escaped Xevas, something between a laugh and a sob. Tears were streaming down her face, her whole body trembling with the effort of keeping her emotions controlled, not broadcasting her overwhelming joy into the harmony where it would hurt her son. "He's not broken," she whispered. "He's not broken." "No," Matt agreed. "He never was." Xevas's free hand reached out and found Matt's, gripping it tightly. And suddenly, the three of them were connected, mother, child, and the strange human who'd shown them a different way to be together. Matt felt the weight of Xevas's hand in his, the heat of her skin, the trembling that spoke of hardly contained emotion. He was acutely aware of her proximity, the scent of those night flowers, the elegant line of her neck as she bent toward her son. When she finally looked up at him, her eyes were molten gold, intense with gratitude and something else, something that made Matt's pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with his professional duties. "Thank you," she said, her voice rough with emotion. "Matt, thank you." Her hand was still in his, her thumb moving in small circles against his palm, a gesture of comfort that felt far more intimate than it should. Matt knew he should pull away, maintain proper boundaries. He was here to help the prince, not to get tangled up in whatever this was between him and a queen. But he didn't move, couldn't move, not when she was looking at him like he'd given her back something precious she'd thought lost forever. "We still have a long way to go," Matt said, his voice lower than he intended. 30 days isn't much time." "Then we will use every moment," Xevas replied. Her hand tightened on his. "Teach me, Matt. Teach me how to see my son through your eyes. Teach me how to be the mother he needs." There was something in the way she said it, an intensity that spoke of more than just a mother's desperation. It spoke of a woman who had spent her entire life broadcasting to a psychic field, never knowing the relief of silence. A woman who was discovering, perhaps, that there was power in quiet connection. "I will," Matt promised. Valen, still pressed against his mother's hand, made another small sound. This time, it was almost musical, a single, clear note that hung in the air. Both adults froze, staring at the child. "Did he just?" Xevas breathed. "Yeah," Matt said, a grin spreading across his face. "Yeah, I think he did." Valen looked up at them, and his smile returned broader this time, almost mischievous, as if he'd been waiting all along for them to realize he was there. In the quiet of the dimmed chamber, far from the psychic symphony of the harmony, a silent prince had finally found his voice. And in that same moment, a queen and a human had found something else entirely, the beginning of a connection that would change everything. Matt had been at the palace for 2 weeks when he noticed something wrong. Valen's progress had been steady but uneven. Some days the boy would be responsive, engaged, willing to try new forms of communication. Other days he would regress, curling into himself, his hands pressed over his ears as if trying to block out an overwhelming sound. At first, Matt had attributed it to the natural ebb and flow of development, but as he paid closer attention, he noticed a pattern. The bad days always seemed to coincide with certain times, specifically the hours after the Grand Vizier's morning visits to the residential wing. Matt had learned the rhythms of the palace by now. He knew when the servants came to refresh the bioluminescent lighting, when the guards changed shifts, when Xevas had court obligations that kept her away. And he knew that the Grand Vizier made a point of passing through the residential wing every morning, ostensibly to check on the queen's needs. But something about those visits didn't sit right. On the morning of the 15th day, Matt arrived earlier than usual, before the palace had fully awakened. He positioned himself in an alcove near Valen's chambers, hidden by the flowing organic architecture of the walls. He didn't have to wait long. The Grand Vizier came gliding down the corridor, his elaborate robes trailing behind him, but he wasn't alone. He carried a small device, no larger than a human's palm, that pulsed with a faint blue light. The Vizier paused outside Valen's door, looked around to ensure he was alone, and then activated the device. The blue light intensified, and Matt felt it a sharp, painful pressure against his mind, like feedback from a speaker pressed directly against his skull. He staggered, pressing his hand against the wall for support. The sensation lasted only seconds, but it was enough. If Matt, with no psychic sensitivity, could feel it, what must it be like for Valen? The Vizier deactivated the device, tucked it into his robes, and continued down the corridor as if nothing had happened. Matt waited until he was sure the Vizier was gone, then made his way to Valen's chambers. The boy was awake, curled in his usual corner, his small hands pressed hard over his ears. His skin had gone pale, almost gray, and he was rocking slightly a self-soothing behavior Matt had seen before. "Hey, buddy," Matt said softly, moving slowly into the room. "Rough morning?" Valen didn't respond, didn't even look up. He was locked deep inside himself, trying to escape something Matt couldn't see but could now understand. Matt settled onto the floor and began his grounding routine, but his mind was racing. A psychic dampener, that's what the device must have been. Not to amplify Valen's signal, but to drown it out, to ensure he remained silent. But why? What did the Vizier gain from keeping the prince broken? The answer, when it came, was obvious: political power. If Valen was removed from the succession, the High Council would need to choose a new heir. And the Grand Vizier, as the Queen's closest advisor, would have significant influence over that choice. Matt needed to tell Xevas, but he needed proof first. The word of a human outsider against one of the highest-ranking members of the court wouldn't be enough. He spent the rest of the day working with Valen, using every technique he knew to help the boy recover from whatever psychic assault the dampener had inflicted. By evening, Valen was responding again, though he was exhausted, his movements slow and his eyes heavy. When Xevas arrived for her evening visit, Matt was waiting. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Somewhere private." Xevas's expression sharpened. "My personal chambers. Follow me." She led him through a series of corridors Matt had never seen before, into a wing of the palace that was clearly reserved for the queen alone. The chambers were vast but surprisingly intimate, with organic furniture that seemed to grow from the floor and walls, covered in bioluminescent vines that created a soft, warm light. "What is it?" Xevas asked once the doors had sealed behind them. "What's wrong?" "I think someone is sabotaging Valen's progress," Matt said bluntly. "I think they're using a psychic dampener to keep him silent." Xevas went very still. Her hair flashed through a rapid series of colors: surprise, anger, fear. "Who?" "The Grand Vizier. I saw him this morning, outside Valen's chambers, using a device. It gave off a psychic pulse that even I could feel, and I'm not sensitive to the harmony at all." "The Grand Vizier has served my family for decades," Xevas said, but there was doubt in her voice. "Why would he?" "Because if Valen is removed from succession, the Vizier will have influence over who replaces him," Matt explained. "It's a power play. He's been ensuring Valen can't connect to the harmony, so the court will have no choice but to declare him unfit." Xevas sank onto a curved bench, her regal composure cracking. "If this is true, Matt, if this is true, then I have been blind. I have let my son suffer because I trusted." "Hey!" Matt moved to sit beside her, close enough that their knees almost touched. "You couldn't have known, and Valen is going to be fine. We're going to make sure of it." She looked at him, and in the soft light of her private chambers, Matt saw past the queen to the woman beneath. The mother who'd been carrying impossible weight, the leader who'd been betrayed by those she trusted most. "How do we stop him?" she asked. "We need to catch him in the act," Matt said. "I need a recording device, something that can capture both visual and psychic data. Can you get that without alerting him?" "The court archivist," Xevas said immediately. "She is loyal to me, not to the High Council. She will have the equipment we need." "Good. We'll set it up tomorrow, hidden in Valen's chambers. When the Vizier makes his morning visit, we'll have our proof." Xevas nodded, but she didn't move. She sat there, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her whole body radiating tension. "Xevas," Matt said gently, "you okay?" "I am furious," she said quietly, "and I am terrified. And I am," she turned to look at him fully, "I am grateful. For you. For your persistence. For the fact that you see my son as he truly is, not as the court believes him to be." "He's a good kid," Matt said. "Smart, perceptive, strong in ways they don't recognize. He deserves a chance to show that." "And you?" Xevas asked. Her hand moved to rest on his knee, a touch that sent heat radiating through Matt's body. "What do you deserve, Matt Gordon?" The air between them had changed, charged with something that had been building since that first moment of connection over Valen. Matt was acutely aware of her proximity, the warmth of her hand, the way her hair had shifted to a deep rose color that he was beginning to recognize as attraction. "I'm just doing my job," Matt said, but his voice had gone rough. "Liar." Xevas's hand moved higher on his thigh, her touch deliberate now. "You care about him. About us. This is more than professional obligation." She was right, and Matt knew it. Somewhere between the fidget toys and the metronome, between teaching a queen to touch her son and watching a silent boy smile, Matt had stopped being just a consultant and had become something else. Someone invested. Someone who cared far more than was wise. "Xevas," he started, but she cut him off. "Do you know what it is like?" she said, her voice low and intense. "To spend your entire life broadcasting every emotion to those around you. To never have privacy, never have silence, never have a moment where your feelings are your own?" "I can't imagine," Matt admitted. "But with you, I have that." Her hand came up to rest against his chest, right over his heart. "Your mind is quiet. When I am near you, I do not have to broadcast. I can simply be. Do you understand what a gift that is?" Matt covered her hand with his own, feeling the rapid beat of his pulse beneath both their palms. "I think I'm starting to." "I am drawn to you," Xevas said, her eyes locked on his. "Not despite your silence, but because of it. Because you are the first being in my entire life who has allowed me to simply feel without the pressure to share those feelings with the collective." "Xevas, Matt struggled for words. I'm just human. I can't offer you what your people can. I can't connect to the harmony. I can't. I don't want the harmony, she interrupted, her voice fierce. Not with you. I want this quiet, this peace, this hunger. The last word hung between them, laden with meaning. Matt saw it in her eyes, felt it in the way her body had shifted closer, recognized it because he felt the exact same thing. This is a bad idea, he said, even as his hand came up to cup her face. I'm here to help your son. Getting involved with you, it complicates everything. Everything is already complicated, Xevas pointed out. Her skin was warm beneath his palm, smooth and alien and utterly perfect. And I am tired of denying myself what I want because of duty and tradition. For once, Matt Gordon, I want to be selfish. She kissed him. It was nothing like kissing a human woman. Her lips were warmer, softer, and she tasted of something sweet and exotic that Matt had no reference for. But the intent behind it was universal, the hunger and need that transcended species. Matt kissed her back, his hands moving into that extraordinary pink hair, and felt her make a small sound of pleasure against his mouth. Her hands were on him, pulling him closer, and Matt surrendered to the moment, to the impossible attraction between a human consultant and an alien queen. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Xevas' hair had gone a brilliant magenta, and her skin was flushed with colors Matt had never seen before. We should stop, Matt said, not meaning it at all. We should, Xevas agreed, not moving away. They stayed like that, foreheads pressed together, sharing breath and warmth, until duty finally reasserted itself. There was still a plot to uncover, a child to protect, an empire to navigate. But something had shifted between them, something fundamental and irreversible. And as Matt left her chambers in the early hours of the morning, he knew that whatever came next, he was in this completely. For Valen, for Xevas, for himself. The quiet human in a symphony of psychic noise had found his frequency at last. The court archivist, a thin, scholarly Lethari whose skin was covered in intricate patterns that reminded Matt of circuit boards, provided the recording equipment without question. Her loyalty to Xevas was absolute, and her curiosity about Matt's primitive human methods made her eager to document everything. This will capture both visual data and psychic resonance, she explained, showing Matt a device no larger than a coin. Place it anywhere in the prince's chambers. It will record for 24 hours before needing to be retrieved. Matt hid the device in the organic lattice of the ceiling where it would be invisible to casual observation. Then he waited. The Grand Vizier made his morning visit right on schedule. Matt, hidden in his usual alcove, watched as the Vizier activated his dampener, saw the pulse of malicious energy designed to drown out any psychic frequency Valen might be generating. When it was done, Matt retrieved the recording and brought it to Xevas in her private chambers. They watched it together, and Matt saw Xevas' expression harden into something cold and regal. This was not the woman who had kissed him in the soft light of evening. This was a queen who had just discovered treason. I will deal with the Grand Vizier, she said, her voice like ice. He will be removed from court and exiled to the furthest colony. I should have him executed, but he has served my family too long to meet such an end. Will the court accept your judgment? Matt asked. They will have no choice. I am still the sovereign. Her hair flashed with dangerous crimson. But this changes our timeline. Once the Vizier is removed, the court will know something has changed. They will press harder for a demonstration that Valen can connect to the harmony. How much time do we have? Days. Perhaps a week if I can delay them. She turned to Matt, and her expression softened slightly. Can you teach him enough in that time? I can teach him to communicate in his own way, Matt said carefully. But Xevas, I need you to understand something. Valen may never connect to the harmony the way your people expect. His neurology is fundamentally different. Then we will change what they expect, Xevas said firmly. We will show them that there are other ways to connect, other forms of strength. That evening, after Valen had been settled for sleep, Xevas came to find Matt in the small guest chambers he'd been assigned. She entered without knocking, closing the door behind her with deliberate finality. I do not wish to be alone tonight, she said simply. Matt rose from the small desk where he'd been reviewing his notes. Xevas. I know what you will say, she interrupted, that this is complicated, that we should maintain boundaries, that my position makes this unwise. She moved closer, and in the dim light, Her skin seemed to shimmer with colors that spoke of desire and determination. But I am tired of wisdom. I am tired of duty. Tonight, I want to be just a woman who desires the touch of a man who makes her feel alive. Matt knew he should resist, should maintain the professional distance that had already eroded beyond repair. But when Xevas reached for him, her hands warm on his face, all his carefully constructed arguments fell away. "I've wanted this," he admitted quietly. "Since the first moment you touched me, I've wanted this." "Then stop denying us both," Xevas murmured, and kissed him. This time, there was no hesitation, no pulling back. Matt pulled her against him, his hands exploring the alien contours of her body, the elegant slope of her shoulders, the curve of her waist, the warmth of her skin that seemed to generate its own heat. She made sounds of pleasure that needed no translation, her hands equally eager as they worked at the fastenings of his clothing. "Your silence," she gasped, as his lips found the sensitive patterns along her collarbone. "It is like drowning in peace. I can feel without broadcasting, want without the entire palace knowing my desire." Matt understood then, in a way he hadn't before. For Xevas, physical intimacy with her own people must always be accompanied by psychic intimacy, every sensation shared and amplified through the harmony. But with him she could simply feel, private, personal, hers alone. "Let me show you," he said against her skin, "what humans do when we have only touch to communicate with." He did. Slowly, deliberately, learning the geography of her alien body with hands and mouth, discovering what made her gasp, what made her arch against him, what made her hair flash through a kaleidoscope of colors. She was responsive in ways that needed no psychic bond to understand. Her body spoke a language as old as desire itself. When they finally came together, it was with an intensity that stole Matt's breath. Xevas moved above him, her luminescent hair cascading around them both, her eyes locked on his with fierce concentration. She was not broadcasting, not sharing this moment with anyone but him, and the intimacy of that privacy was more powerful than any psychic connection could have been. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Xevas's head on Matt's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "This changes everything," she said softly. "Yeah," Matt agreed. "It does. If the court discovers that I have taken a human lover..." "We'll deal with it," Matt said, his hand running through her extraordinary hair. "One crisis at a time." Xevas lifted her head to look at him, and her expression was softer than he'd ever seen it. "You make me believe things are possible that I had thought impossible. You give me hope, Matt Gordon." "We'll figure it out," Matt promised. "Together." She kissed him again, soft and lingering, before settling back against his chest. And in the quiet of the small chamber, far from the psychic symphony of the court, a queen allowed herself to simply be a woman in the arms of a man who offered her the rarest gift of all, silence. The exile of the Grand Vizier sent shockwaves through the court. Xevas had presented the evidence to the High Council, and even the most traditional members could not deny the treachery. The Vizier was stripped of his position and sent to a remote colony with only the clothes on his back. But his removal created a power vacuum, and the rival Duchess moved quickly to fill it. She appeared at court with her son, prominently displayed a boy who broadcast his thoughts and emotions with crystal clarity into the harmony, everything a Lethari heir should be. "Your Majesty," the Duchess said during a council session, her voice dripping with false concern. "Now that the traitor has been removed, surely we can move forward with the testing of Prince Valen? The people deserve to know if their heir can truly connect to the harmony." Xevas sat on her throne, her expression implacable. "Prince Valen is progressing under Mr. Gordon's tutelage. He requires more time." "Time is something we do not have," interjected another council member. "The uncertainty weakens our position with the outer colonies. They need to see strength, not a silent heir." Matt watched from his position at the side of the throne room, officially there as a security consultant, though everyone knew his true role by now. He saw the political maneuvering, the careful positioning, the way the Duchess's supporters were coordinating their attacks. "I propose a demonstration," the Duchess continued. "Let the prince appear before the court. If he can connect to the harmony in even the smallest way, we will accept him as heir. But if he cannot," she let the implication hang. Xevas's hair flashed with hardly contained anger, but her voice remained steady. "Very well. In 3 days' time, Prince Valen will appear before the court. But I set the terms of the demonstration." "Your Majesty." "I am still the sovereign," Xevas said, her voice cutting through the protests. and I will determine how my own son is tested. Do you challenge my authority?" The Duchess bowed her head, but Matt saw the satisfied smile on her face. She thought she'd won. She thought a silent prince would humiliate himself in front of the entire court, clearing the way for her own son. She had no idea what Matt and Valen had been working on. That evening, Matt brought Valen to a large, empty chamber in the palace that had been cleared for their use. It was time to teach the boy something new, something that would prove to the court that communication came in many forms. "We're going to play a game," Matt explained, setting up several stations around the room. Each station had different objects, building blocks, art supplies, musical instruments, physical puzzles. It's called parallel play. You do your thing at one station, and I'll do mine at another. We don't have to interact directly, but we're still playing together. We're still connected. Valen looked uncertain, but he trusted Matt by now. He moved to the station with the building blocks and began to stack them, creating surprisingly intricate structures. Matt went to the musical instruments and began to play a simple rhythm on a drum. Steady, consistent, a heartbeat. At first, they operated completely independently. But gradually, subtly, Valen began to adjust his building rhythm to match Matt's drumbeat. He would place a block in time with each strike. The two activities, music and construction, became synchronized without either of them explicitly coordinating. After a few minutes, Matt changed his rhythm. Valen paused, listened, then adjusted his building speed to match the new tempo. "That's it," Matt said softly. "You're connecting. Not through psychic resonance, but through pattern recognition, through adaptation, through awareness of another being's presence." They played like this for an hour, moving between different stations, always maintaining this subtle, unspoken synchronization. Valen would draw with crayons while Matt sketched nearby, their hand movements falling into complementary rhythms. They would solve puzzles, each working on their own but aware of the other's progress, naturally pacing themselves to finish at the same time. It was connection without words, without psychic bonds. It was the fundamental human skill of being together, while being separate, of maintaining individual identity, while acknowledging the presence of others. Xevas appeared in the doorway watching them work. She had learned to mute her psychic broadcast before entering Valen's space, and now she stood in silence, observing her son and the human who had taught him a new way to exist in the world. When the session ended, and Valen had been escorted back to his chambers by a trusted servant, Xevas approached Matt. "Will it be enough?" she asked quietly. "For the court?" "I don't know," Matt admitted, "but it's the truth of who he is. A child who can connect, who can communicate, who can lead, just not in the way they expect." "They will call it weak," Xevas said. "They will say that a ruler must be able to command through the harmony." "Then we'll show them that there are other forms of strength." Matt turned to face her fully. "Xevas, what's the harmony really for? At its core? Connection, unity, shared understanding. And Valen can do all of that," Matt argued. "He just does it through observation, pattern recognition, and physical presence instead of psychic broadcast. In some ways, his approach is more powerful because it requires genuine attention. You can't fake parallel play the way you might fake a psychic connection." Xevas studied him for a long moment, and then something shifted in her expression, a dawning realization. "You are teaching me as much as you are teaching him," she said. "You are showing me that the harmony is not the only way, that there is strength in silence, power in attention, connection in presence." "I'm just showing you what humans figured out a long time ago," Matt said. "That different doesn't mean less than, it just means different." Xevas closed the distance between them, her hands coming up to frame his face. "You have given me back my son," she said fiercely. "And you have given me something I did not know. I needed a way to see beyond the limitations of my own culture." "We're not done yet," Matt warned. "The demonstration—" "Will succeed," Xevas interrupted, "because I will not allow my child to be cast aside for the crime of being different. And because you, Matt Gordon, have taught us both to believe in possibilities the court cannot even imagine." She kissed him then, in the empty chamber where her son had learned to play, and Matt tasted her determination, her fear, her hope. When they parted, her hair was shimmering with colors that spoke of complex emotions, love and worry, and fierce protective determination all tangled together. 3 days, Matt said. 3 days, Xevas agreed, and then we changed the world. The morning of the second day before the demonstration, Matt took Valen for a walk in the palace gardens. It was part of their routine, now getting the boy out of the oppressive psychic noise of the interior into the open air where the harmony was diffused and diluted. The royal bodyguard accompanied them, maintaining his usual stony silence. But Matt had noticed a shift in the warrior's attitude over the past weeks. He watched Valen's interactions with Matt with something that might have been respect or at least curiosity. The hostility had faded. The gardens were extraordinary organic architecture taken to its logical extreme, with living structures that grew and shifted according to some plan Matt couldn't fathom. Water flowed through channels carved in the ground, and the air smelled of those night flowers Xevas carried with her. Valen was more relaxed here, his movements looser, his eyes bright with interest. He was examining a cluster of luminescent fungi when Matt's combat instincts, honed from years in dangerous colonial sectors, suddenly screamed a warning. He saw the glint of metal in the shrubbery, saw the trajectory, saw the weapon extending. Matt moved without thinking, his body responding with the muscle memory of someone trained to protect. He threw himself between Valen and the threat, pulling the boy behind him as something sharp whistled through the air where the prince's head had been a moment before. The royal bodyguard reacted instantly, his massive form surging toward the shrubbery. There was a brief, violent scuffle, and then the bodyguard emerged, dragging a figure in servant's clothing, a Lethari whose skin was flashing with panic and fear. "Assassin!" the bodyguard snarled, his voice like grinding stone. Matt kept Valen behind him, his body still shielding the boy even though the immediate threat had passed. He could feel Valen's small hands gripping his tactical vest, the child's rapid breathing against his back. "Who sent you?" the bodyguard demanded, shaking the assassin. The servant's mouth opened, but before words could emerge, his body went rigid. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed to the ground, convulsing. By the time Matt reached him, the man was dead, some kind of poison capsule, activated remotely or through psychic trigger. "Get the prince inside," Matt snapped. "Now." The bodyguard hesitated for only a moment, then scooped Valen up and ran for the palace. Matt stayed with the body, his mind racing through the implications. Someone had just tried to kill the prince. Not discredit him, not remove him politically, but actually murder him, which meant someone was desperate enough to risk everything. The rival duchess. It had to be. By the time Matt made it back to the palace, chaos had erupted. Xevas was in the throne room, surrounded by guards, her hair flashing through violent shades of red and purple. When she saw Matt, something in her expression cracked. "Is he—" "He's safe," Matt said quickly. "The bodyguard got him to his chambers. He's shaken but unharmed." Xevas sagged with relief, but her eyes were hard as diamonds. "Who dares attack my son?" "We need to talk," Matt said quietly, privately. She dismissed the guards with a sharp gesture and led Matt to a small antechamber off the throne room. The moment the door closed, her careful control shattered. She grabbed Matt's shoulders, her fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "Tell me," she demanded. "I think it was orchestrated by the rival duchess," Matt said bluntly. "The servant died before he could be questioned poison trigger. That level of planning requires resources and authority. If I accuse her without proof—" "She wins," Matt finished, "because it creates chaos right before the demonstration. It makes you look weak, paranoid, unfit to rule." Xevas's hand slid from his shoulders to his chest, and Matt saw the fear in her eyes, not for herself, but for Valen. "They will not stop," she whispered. "Even if we succeed in the demonstration, they will keep coming. My son will never be safe as long as they see him as weak." "Then we make sure they never see him as weak again," Matt said firmly. He caught her hands in his, holding them against his chest. "Xevas, trust me. Trust Valen. He's stronger than they know." "How can you be so certain?" "Because I've seen him," Matt said. "Really seen him. Not as a silent prince or a broken heir, but as a child who has survived in an environment that causes him constant pain. That takes a kind of strength your people don't even recognize. He's a survivor, Xevas. He just needs a chance to prove it." Xevas searched his face for a long moment, then pulled him into a fierce embrace. Matt held her, feeling the tremors that ran through her body, the weight of a crown that had never felt heavier. "I cannot lose him," she said against his shoulder. "And I cannot lose you. You have become—" She pulled back to look at him, her eyes swimming with emotion. "You have become essential. Both of you." "We're not going anywhere," Matt promised. "But we need to accelerate our timeline. The demonstration needs to happen tomorrow, not in 2 days, before they can make another attempt." "'Stead," The court. We'll deal with it, Matt interrupted. We announced tonight that the demonstration will occur tomorrow morning. That gives them no time to plan another attack. And it shows strength that you're not afraid, that you're not waiting for permission. Xevas nodded slowly, her royal mask sliding back into place. Very well, tomorrow morning then. She cupped his face in her hands, her thumb tracing his cheekbone. Thank you, Matt, for saving my son, for believing in him, for... He kissed her, cutting off whatever she was about to say. Because words were inadequate for what had grown between them, this impossible connection between human and Lethari, consultant and queen, two beings who had found in each other something neither had known they needed. When they parted, Xevas's hair had shifted to a color Matt had never seen before, a soft, iridescent blue that seemed to glow from within. What does that mean? He asked, gesturing to her hair. Xevas smiled, sad and beautiful. Hope, she said simply. It means hope. That night, Matt stayed with Valen in the prince's chambers. The boy had been badly frightened by the attack, and for the first time since Matt had arrived, Valen had sought direct physical contact. He sat pressed against Matt's side, his small body trembling with residual fear. Matt wrapped an arm around him, holding him steady. You're safe, he said quietly. I promise you, you're safe. Valen looked up at him with those expressive blue eyes, and then did something extraordinary. He leaned his head against Matt's chest, right over his heart, and closed his eyes. Matt felt his throat tighten with emotion. This child, who had been told his entire life that he was broken, was choosing to trust. Was choosing to connect in the way that felt safe to him, through physical presence, through the steady rhythm of a heartbeat, through the anchoring weight of another being. Tomorrow's going to be hard, Matt said softly. The court is going to test you, and it's going to be loud and overwhelming, but you don't have to face it alone. Your mom will be there. I'll be there. And you are so much stronger than they know. Valen's hand found Matt's, small fingers wrapping around larger ones. A squeeze, deliberate, communicative, clear. I understand. I'm ready. I trust you. All of that in a single gesture. That's my boy, Matt murmured, and settled in for the long night ahead. Tomorrow, they would show the court what strength really looked like. The announcement of the accelerated demonstration sent fresh waves of speculation through the court. Matt could feel it even in his isolated corner of the palace, the increasing pressure of the harmony, charged with anticipation and judgment. Xevas came to him late that night, after Valen had finally fallen into exhausted sleep. She entered Matt's chambers without knocking, and Matt saw immediately that she had shed her royal regalia. She wore a simple robe, her hair loose and flowing around her shoulders, her feet bare against the cool floor. I should be preparing, she said quietly, reviewing strategies with my advisors, ensuring every detail of tomorrow is perfect. But instead you're here, Matt finished. Instead, I am here. She moved closer, and Matt saw the vulnerability in her eyes. Because tomorrow may change everything, and tonight I do not wish to be a queen. I wish only to be a woman, with the man who has given her back, her son. Matt rose from where he'd been sitting, reviewing notes that he knew by heart. Xevas, do not tell me this is unwise, she interrupted. Do not tell me we should maintain boundaries. Tomorrow I may lose everything, my son, my throne, my hope. Tonight, I want to feel alive. She closed the distance between them, her hands finding his face, and Matt saw in her expression a fierce, desperate need that had nothing to do with duty and everything to do with two people who had found each other in impossible circumstances. Then feel alive, Matt said, and pulled her against him. They came together with an intensity born of urgency and fear and defiance. Xevas's hands were everywhere, pulling at his clothing with an impatience that spoke of someone who had spent too long denying herself. Matt matched her desperation, his own need fueled by the knowledge that tomorrow could tear them apart. Your silence, Xevas gasped as his hands traced the patterns on her skin. It is like water after a lifetime of thirst. I can feel without the weight of the harmony demanding I share it. I can want without justification. I can be simply myself. Matt understood then, more fully than before, what he represented to her. Not just a lover, but liberation. A space where she could exist without the constant pressure of psychic connection, where her feelings were her own, private and precious. He laid her down on the narrow bed and took his time, learning every inch of her alien body, discovering what made her arch and gasp and cry out. Her skin shifted through colors he had no names for, each shade speaking of pleasure or surprise or building intensity. Her hair was like silk in his hands, alive and responsive, darkening to deep magenta as her arousal mounted. When they finally joined, it was with a desperation that stole both their breaths. Xevas moved above him, her eyes locked on his, and Matt saw in them everything she couldn't say, fear and hope, and something that might have been love, if such a word could span the gulf between their species. "Matt," she breathed, his name a prayer or a plea or both. He pulled her down to him, kissing her deeply as their bodies moved together, and felt the moment she shattered in his arms. Her psychic shields, so carefully maintained, cracked for just an instant, and Matt felt a ghost of what the harmony must be like, a flash of overwhelming emotion, joy and pleasure and relief so intense it was almost painful. Then it was gone, and there was just the two of them, tangled together in the aftermath, both breathing hard. Xevas collapsed against his chest, her heart racing beneath his hands. "I have never," she said between gasps, "been with someone who could not feel what I was feeling through the harmony. It is liberating, terrifying, intimate in ways I have no words for." "I know," Matt said, running his fingers through her hair. "I know." They lay like that for a long time, neither wanting to break the spell, but eventually duty reasserted itself. Xevas stirred, pressing a kiss to Matt's chest before beginning to extract herself from their tangle. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, "the court will demand that Valen demonstrate his connection to the harmony. They will expect him to broadcast, to resonate, to prove he can be one with our people." "And he can't," Matt said, "not in the way they want." "No, but you have taught him other ways to connect." Xevas turned to look at him, her expression fierce. "Whatever happens tomorrow, Matt Gordon, know that you have given me more than you can possibly understand. You have given me my son. You have given me hope. You have given me," she paused, her hand coming up to rest over his heart, "you have given me yourself, and that is a gift beyond measure." Matt caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "We're going to get through this. Valen is going to show them what real strength looks like. And if the court rejects him, if they choose the Duchess's son instead, then we figure out what comes next," Matt said firmly. "But Xevas, I'm not walking away from you, from either of you. Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together." She kissed him again, long and deep and desperate, as if trying to memorize the feeling. When she finally pulled away, her hair had settled into that soft, iridescent blue. "Hope. I should go," she said reluctantly. "If the court discovers I spent the night in your chambers on the eve of the demonstration, they'll have more ammunition," Matt finished. He helped her into her robe, his hands lingering on her shoulders. "Xevas, I—" "Don't," she said softly. "Don't say it. Not yet. Let us survive tomorrow first, and then we will speak of what we are to each other." She slipped out into the night, leaving Matt alone with his thoughts and his fears and the lingering scent of night flowers. He didn't sleep. Instead, he prepared one final tool for Valen, something the boy could carry into the throne room as an anchor. A small object, weighted and textured, that would provide constant sensory feedback. A physical reminder that he wasn't alone. When dawn came, Matt was ready, and when he went to collect Valen, he found the boy already awake, sitting on his cushion, looking somehow older than his years. "Big day," Matt said quietly, kneeling beside him. Valen nodded slowly. Matt held out the object. He'd prepared a smooth stone wrapped in soft fabric, heavy enough to be grounding but small enough to fit in a child's hand. "For you. When things get overwhelming, you hold on to this. You feel its weight, and you remember that you're not broken, you're just different, and different is okay." Valen took the stone, his small fingers closing around it. Then he did something that made Matt's breath catch. He looked directly at Matt and spoke, his voice only above a whisper but clear and deliberate. "Thank you." 2 words, the first Matt had ever heard him speak. "You're welcome, buddy," Matt said, his voice rough with emotion. "Now let's go show them what you can do." The great throne room was packed. Every member of the High Council was present, along with representatives from the major houses, military leaders, and what looked like half the noble families in the empire. The psychic pressure was overwhelming. Matt could feel it even without any sensitivity to the harmony, a wall of judgment and anticipation that pressed against his mind like a physical force. Valen stood beside him, small and seemingly fragile in his formal robes. The boy's hand was tight around the weighted stone, his other hand gripping Matt's tactical vest. Matt could feel him trembling. Xevas sat on her throne, regal and composed, but Matt could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the armrests. Her hair was a neutral pale pink, carefully controlled, revealing nothing. The rival Duchess stood off to one side, her son beside her. The boy was broadcasting confidence and competence into the harmony, his psychic presence filling the room like a peacock's display. "Look at me," his whole being seemed to scream. "This is what a proper heir looks like." The court archivist stepped forward, her circuit-patterned skin glowing faintly in the chamber's light. "The trial will proceed as follows," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "Prince Valen will be subjected to the resonance test. He must demonstrate his ability to connect to the biotic harmony by broadcasting his emotional state clearly enough for the High Council to perceive." Matt felt Valen flinch against him. This was it, the moment they'd been preparing for, and yet Matt knew that Valen would never pass this test as it was currently defined. The boy couldn't broadcast on the frequency the Lethari expected. "However," Xevas said, rising from her throne, "I have requested a modification to the test." A murmur ran through the assembled court. The rival Duchess's eyes narrowed. "Prince Valen's connection to the harmony manifests differently than our standard expectations." Xevas continued, her voice strong and clear. "As is my right as sovereign, I am requesting that the test be expanded to include alternative demonstrations of connection and communication." "Your Majesty," one of the High Council members spoke up, "the resonance test has been used for centuries. It is our most sacred." "And I am not asking to eliminate it," Xevas interrupted smoothly. "Merely to expand it, unless you believe our traditions are too rigid to accommodate new understanding." The challenge was clear. To refuse would be to admit that Lethari culture couldn't adapt, couldn't grow. Matt saw the council members exchanging glances, their skin colors shifting with uncertainty. "What alternative demonstration do you propose?" the Duchess asked, her tone dripping with skepticism. "A test of connection through parallel observation and response," Xevas said. "Prince Valen will participate in activities that demonstrate his awareness of others, his ability to adapt and respond, and his capacity for connection through means other than traditional psychic broadcast." "That is absurd. Are you challenging my authority to define the test for my own son?" Xevas's voice cut like a blade, and her hair flashed dangerously red. "I am still the sovereign, unless you wish to contest that as well?" Silence fell over the throne room. Finally, the head of the High Council, an ancient Lethari whose skin had faded to a pale sage, spoke. "The sovereign's request is unconventional, but not without precedent. We will allow both tests. However," and here his voice hardened, "the prince must demonstrate competence in both. Connection to the harmony cannot be entirely bypassed." Matt's heart sank. That was the trap. Valen could pass every human-based test Matt threw at him, but he would still fail the resonance test. And failure in either test would be grounds for removal from succession. But Xevas merely inclined her head. "Agreed. We will begin with the traditional test." She gestured, and several members of the High Council formed a circle in the center of the throne room. This was the resonance test. The council members would project specific emotions into the harmony, and Valen would be expected to identify them and broadcast his own response. It was designed to be simple, something any Lethari child could do by age 3. For Valen, it would be impossible. "Prince Valen, please step into the circle," the court archivist instructed. Valen looked up at Matt, terror clear in his sapphire eyes. "You can do this," Matt said quietly, though he had no idea if that was true. "Remember what we practiced. Focus on the stone. Focus on your breathing. And no matter what happens, you're not alone." Valen took a shuddering breath, then walked forward on trembling legs. He stood in the center of the circle, looking impossibly small, surrounded by the towering forms of the council members. The test began. The council members started broadcasting emotions, first simple ones: joy, sadness, anger, fear. The psychic waves washed over the room, and Matt saw the assembled nobles nodding as they perceived each emotion clearly. But Valen just stood there, his hands pressed over his ears, his whole body rigid with distress. "Does the prince identify the emotions?" the lead counselor asked. Valen said nothing, did nothing. His eyes were squeezed shut, his entire being focused on trying to block out the overwhelming psychic noise. "He shows no response," another counselor said, and Matt heard the disappointment in his voice. "He cannot perceive the harmony." "Perhaps the stimulus is insufficient," the Duchess said, moving closer. "Perhaps we need to make the broadcast stronger, clearer, so that even a silent can hear." Matt saw her expression, the cruel satisfaction, the predatory anticipation. She was going to do something. Something that would hurt Valen. "Wait," he started to say. But the Duchess had already reached the circle. She raised her hands, and suddenly the psychic pressure in the room intensified tenfold. It hit Matt like a wave, driving him to his knees. Around the room, even the nobles were wincing, overwhelmed by the force of the broadcast. "And Valen," the boy screamed. Not a psychic scream that registered on the harmony, but a physical scream of pain that tore from his throat. He collapsed to the floor, his hands pressed hard against his ears, his small body convulsing. "Stop!" Xevas shouted, surging from her throne. "You're hurting him." "I am merely ensuring the test is thorough," the Duchess said calmly, though her eyes gleamed with malice. "If he cannot withstand the harmony, how can he possibly rule?" The psychic pressure continued, a crushing weight. Valen was sobbing now, curled in a ball, utterly overwhelmed. And Matt knew, in that moment, that this was it. This was the breaking point. Either Valen would be crushed by this, or he would find a way to stand. Matt pushed himself to his feet, fighting through the psychic pressure. He started toward the circle, toward the child who needed him. "Mr. Gordon, you cannot interfere," someone shouted. "Watch me," Matt snarled and kept moving. Every step was agony. The psychic pressure was like wading through concrete. But Matt kept his eyes on Valen, on the small figure who had trusted him, who had believed him when Matt said he wasn't broken. He reached the circle. The council members tried to stop him, but Matt pushed through. He knelt beside Valen, his hand reaching out. "Valen," he said, his voice cutting through the psychic noise. "Hey, buddy, I'm right here." Valen's eyes opened wild, terrified, lost. "I need you to listen to me," Matt said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "You're going to be okay. But I need you to do something for me. Can you do that?" Valen couldn't respond, couldn't speak. But Matt saw the tiny nod. "Stand up," Matt said. "Stand up and come to me. Show them you're not broken. Show them you're strong." For a long moment, Valen didn't move. The psychic pressure continued to crush down, the Duchess's cruel broadcast filling the throne room with overwhelming force. Matt could see the boy struggling, see him fighting against every instinct that told him to shut down, to curl up, to disappear. But then something changed in Valen's eyes. The terror was still there, but beneath it, Matt saw something else. Determination, strength, the same fierce will that lived in his mother. Slowly, painfully, Valen pushed himself up. His legs were shaking, his whole body trembling, but he got to his feet. And then he moved. Not toward his mother. Not toward the guards or the council. He ran across the floor, stumbling through the overwhelming psychic noise, and threw himself at Matt, his small arms wrapping around Matt's waist, his face pressed hard against Matt's chest. The throne room went silent with shock. A Lethari prince had just chosen a human over his own people. A silent heir had just demonstrated preference for the one being in the room who couldn't connect to the harmony at all. "What is the meaning of this?" the Duchess demanded. "He runs from his own people to hide behind a human? This proves he cannot rule." But Matt was feeling something. Valen was pressed against his chest, right over his heart, and Matt could feel the boy's breathing beginning to synchronize with his own. Could feel Valen using his heartbeat as an anchor, just as they'd practiced. And then he felt it a vibration, starting deep in Valen's chest, low frequency. So low that human ears could hardly perceive it, far below the range where Lethari psychic senses typically operated. But it was there, a resonance, a broadcast. "Court Archivist," Matt called out, his voice carrying across the silent throne room. "Do you have equipment that can detect psychic frequencies below the standard Lethari range?" The archivist blinked, confused. "Below the standard range? That would be..." "Yes, we have such equipment for geological surveys. But why would..." "Get it, now." Something in Matt's tone made the archivist move. She disappeared through a side door and returned moments later with a device covered in organic circuitry that pulsed with bioluminescent light. "This can detect psychic resonance down to subsonic levels," she said, moving closer. "But I don't understand what..." She stopped, staring at her readouts. "What is it?" Xevas demanded, having descended from her throne. "What do you see?" The archivist's skin had gone pale, her circuit patterns flickering rapidly. There is a broadcast, subsonic, incredibly powerful. She looked up, her eyes wide. "It's coming from the prince." The throne room erupted in confused voices. The Duchess's expression had gone from triumphant to furious. "Impossible," she spat. "The prince is silent. We all know." "We all know nothing," the archivist interrupted, her scholarly fascination overriding protocol. "We have been listening for resonance in the wrong frequency range. The prince broadcasts perfectly, he simply does so at a wavelength below our standard perception." She adjusted her equipment, amplifying the signal. And suddenly, everyone in the throne room could feel it, a low, powerful thrum that resonated in their bones, in their organs, in the deepest parts of their bodies. It was like standing next to a massive drum, feeling the beat in your chest cavity. It was Valen's psychic voice, finally heard. And what he was broadcasting was unmistakable. Protection, safety, trust, connection. All of it directed at Matt. "He is bonded to the human," one of the council members said, awe in his voice. "A psychic bond at subsonic frequency. I have never seen anything like this." Xevas moved closer, her eyes locked on her son. "Valen," she said softly. "My son, you were never silent, we were simply deaf." Valen lifted his head from Matt's chest and looked at his mother. Then, deliberately, he released one hand from Matt's vest and reached out toward Xevas. She took his hand immediately, and the moment their skin touched, the subsonic broadcast shifted. It had been focused entirely on Matt, but now it expanded to include Xevas. The throne room could feel it, the connection between mother and child finally made manifest. Xevas dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face, her hair flashing through every color in rapid succession. "I hear you," she sobbed. "Oh, my son, I hear you." The Duchess was backing away, her face twisted with rage and fear. "This proves nothing. A subsonic broadcast is not." "It is perfectly valid," the lead counselor interrupted, his ancient voice carrying authority. "In fact, it may be superior. A subsonic broadcast cannot be blocked or dampened without specialized equipment. Prince Valen may well be the most securely connected Lethari ever born." He moved forward, studying Valen with new eyes. "And the fact that he has formed such a powerful bond with the human consultant speaks to his capacity for connection across differences. That is precisely the skill a ruler needs in our expanding empire." The Duchess realized she had lost. Her carefully laid plans, her assassination attempt, her cruel theatrics, all of it had backfired spectacularly. She turned and fled from the throne room, her supporters melting away like shadows. The lead counselor turned to address the assembled court. "It is clear that Prince Valen possesses the capacity to connect to the harmony, merely at a different frequency than we anticipated. As such, there is no grounds to remove him from succession." The line continues. A cheer went up from those loyal to Xevas, and the psychic pressure in the room shifted from judgment to celebration. But Matt was focused entirely on the small boy still holding on to him. Valen looked up, those sapphire eyes bright with pride and relief, and smiled. "You did it," Matt said quietly. "You showed them who you really are." Valen's response was subsonic, but Matt felt it in his chest, a rumbling that translated clearly even without words. "Thank you." Xevas wrapped her arms around both of them, and for a moment, the three of them stood together in the center of the throne room, a queen, a human, and a prince who had just redefined what it meant to connect.
And that brings us to the end of today's story. Thanks for taking the time to listen. I really appreciate it. This channel is all about original human-focused science fiction, and every story is presented as a part of a larger collection. If you'd like to continue, there's another story from this channel on screen now that fits right alongside this one. Feel free to jump into that next, and I'll see you there.